Right, welcome to episode 7 of the Reptile Chronicles podcast with myself, Ken from Viv Visions. Today we got a super special guest on, goes by the name of Hen.ch Reptiles. His name is Henry Chan. So we're going to be talking a lot about large snakes, varanids, and basically all stuff large reptiles really. So we're going to bring him on and we're going to start the conversation. So let's get into it. Hello, how are we doing?
Hi Ken, how's it going, mate? You all right?
Yeah, mate, good. Yeah, just busy as per usual. But yeah, so if you'd just like to give an introduction on yourself and what sort of things you keep, really.
Yeah, so my name's Henry, as you've mentioned. Instagram handle Hen.ch Reptiles. Basically, I started keeping reptiles ever since I was about maybe like 16. Initially, it wasn't reptiles that caught me. It was visiting someone's house who had a chili rose tarantula. And that was my first introduction to exotics and realizing that, wow, you can actually keep these amazing creatures at home. So I did actually start off with teas with tarantulas. And then later on, eventually, it started. First reptile was a leopard gecko, and then it kind of like grew from there, really. But over the years, I've experienced different species, and I found that the ones that I naturally had more of an affiliation, or more of like basically suited my liking. It was more like the larger snakes, like reticulated pythons primarily, and varanids. So I love the monitor lizard as well, and that's where I've chosen to, focus my attention to from that point.
Yeah, because obviously, like I started off with the bearded dragon, then got a few colubrid snakes, and then obviously I fell in love with the varanids like yourself, and obviously I ended up getting a water monitor, and obviously if I could have loads I would, but obviously
it's something that just grows, doesn't it, over time. You start with one thing and you say, right, that's it, but it's never enough. There's always one more. There's always another one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I went to a shop today and I was looking. That was it. It was June geckos, like Stenodactylus petri, and I was looking at them. I was like, oh, I can't have them because it's just I got no space left. So, but no, there's always something else. So yeah, I got what I got now, and that'll do.
I think you always find yourself trying to find reasons why you shouldn't get something, because you want them, so you need to try and justify why you shouldn't get it, because otherwise, you're going to get the animal.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I mean. If they got long-term plans for breeding and stuff, then it may be worth it. But
yeah, definitely.
Only if you got like myself and yourself, you got loads of animals. I'd rather go and buy another enclosure for my animal. Do you know what I mean? Instead of bringing them something else. But yeah, so I've got a couple of questions, like quick fire question. So snakes or lizards?
Oh, God, lizards.
Tarantulas or centipedes?
Tarantulas.
And in your common interest, is it better? Do you like vipers or cobras better?
Cobras.
Yeah, I do like myself a cobra. This obviously I don't think I could trust myself around one.
Well, it's just the king cobra is like, if there was ever a hot animal that I have a strong passion towards, it would be the king cobras, just for the sheer intelligence and how majestic they are. And you've got an animal that's like up to 17, 18 feet tops.
Yeah,
it's definitely a sight.
Yeah, I was watching a video. I think it's Chandler's Wildlife who owns a king cobra, Kevin.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, mate. I was like, that thing's massive. It's huge.
It's one of those, like, you admire them from a distance, and don't get me wrong, I'd love to be up close and see one in person, maybe even interact as long as there's a primary handler. But I guess it's a road that I've already said to myself, ruled out for myself in terms of going down, the seriously hot stuff.
Yeah, no. If I was ever to go into hot, it'd probably be crocodilians, and that'd be it. I don't think
Yeah, exactly. Crocodile, maybe Gila monsters, bearded lizards at max.
Yeah, because you can obviously they are quick to a certain extent, like Gila monsters and like helodermas, but you can sense when they're gonna turn on you or not turn they have an angry spell. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not so much a case of like a split second and that's it.
Yeah, you've lost your hand or you die.
Exactly.
But all right. So if you could just tell us, how did you? Obviously, you said you got into the hobby with obviously leopard geckos and stuff, and
Yep.
then you were on it. But could you just tell like what is like Hen.ch Reptiles all about in a whole?
Yeah. Well, I can go from the very start of how my passion began, if you like. So, like, also when I was a child, really, like, from being a young kid, under less than 10 years old, always watching Crocodile Hunter, Steve Irwin, David Attenborough, and all the other guys. You know, I used to watch Mark O'Shea, Austin Stevens, and all of them. And growing up, these were the guys I looked up to, and they were able to get up close with animals that I was absolutely in awe with, things that blew my mind. And it stuck with me all through my childhood and teenage years. And that's when I found out. I never even looked into the possibility of keeping these animals in captivity. So that's why when I did find out that you could keep captive exotics and that it was a thing, it absolutely blew my mind and it opened up a new world to me. So like I said, when I started, it was the teas, then it went to leopard gecko. I did have a bearded dragon as well. So this is all went back in my teens. And it grew from there. And I think being like an eager teen, it quickly gets out of hand to the point where you're not really managing as well as you should do. And that definitely happened with me. So I was living at home with my parents. I had a few too many animals. And then parents one day hit the roof when the electricity bill came in. And yeah, that was like an eye opener for me. So I had to basically book up my ideas and realize that, you got to take a step back, do what's manageable within your own means. And I think a lot of people have gone through this at some point. And then you get to a point in your keeping career hobby where you realize that you've got to scale back and, just work with where your passions lie and just stay within manageable means. But as for Hen.ch Reptiles, out of all it just came through not so much trial and error, but keeping animals and realizing that certain ones are more suited to you than other ones. Your living situation, the time you have available, and the things that, plus obviously importantly, the animals that you're actually passionate about. So for me, the animals that firmly ticked all the boxes for me were reticulated pythons and the monitor lizards. All the varanids. They do everything in terms of their intelligence, their size, their activity levels, and just the variation in behaviors and whatnot. They just tick everything for me, and that's why they're my primary focus.
Yeah, so obviously with the obviously I own 3 different types of varanids. So I got the water monitor, the boss monitor, so a baby at the minute, and I got the Aki monitor.
Yep.
So you can see like the intelligence levels of each one of them, like for sure. So obviously with the water monitor, and we get onto that, I know you own them yourself, like how smart they are. So like he knows when he's getting fed. So I've had to start changing the feeding days all the time, just randomly feed it when he looks hungry. I don't have the feeding days anymore. Because like I went out to the glass and he wouldn't know, if I didn't have food, he wouldn't want to know. So we had this stage where he's gone through like an early adolescent stage. He's still only under 2 years old, but he gets that point where they're getting agitated with the sight of a human. So we've had to just change up everything, because obviously when he was younger, it was a lot more easier to install the bond between yourself and the lizard. But
Definitely.
But we obviously now, because I've got the boss monitor as a baby, I'm trying to like put my attention to that for the moment, because obviously, like you said, with the varanids, they're very intelligent. If they grow older and don't have any interaction, it's kind of hard to, form a
manage
bond.
between.
Yeah. The Aki monitor is brilliant. If I want to interact with a monitor that doesn't really pack a punch when it bites you, then I'll just hang out with the Aki monitor. But yeah.
So did you get your guys, were they captive bred, or have you got a wild caught?
Is this the water monitor you're on about?
Either of them really. Cause I just wanted to know your experience between captive bred and wild caught.
So my water monitor is captive farmed import. It was, and then the boss monitor was also captive farmed import, and the Aki monitor was a captive bred individual. And I could definitely tell the difference between captive bred individual imports. I mean, to be fair, the water monitor was very, very easy to kind of like associate a bond with over, say, more like the African species, like the Bosque monitors and stuff like that. They're very hard to. So I had a Nile as well at one point.
Oh,
and it was very hard to initiate a bond with that one, but yeah. So obviously it was easy to form a bond with the water monitor over the Bosque at the minute, but he's getting there. It's getting there.
Yeah, I definitely found in my experience that there's a stark difference between captive bred and wild farmed or wild caught even. Because my oldest female water monitor, she was captive farmed, and she came around. She looked approximately 6 months old, and it took the best part of like 3.5 years for me to be able to get to the point where I can now go in and pick her up and hold her. But prior to that, I mean, those first few months, her instant reaction to my hand was to bite.
Yeah.
Tail whip, or if I got any closer, to bite. And obviously, it took nearly the best part of a year to be able to confidently go in and just stroke her without any repercussions and things like that. It's just a long, drawn-out process. Whilst my male Asian water monitor that I've got now, he was captive bred, and he came to me. I think he was like 3 or 4 months old. Absolute dream, because you can go in there, just grab him. Hands can move fast around him. He doesn't mistake it for prey. He doesn't have that natural instinct to defend himself or feel like he needs to. So yeah, I think that's just the main reason I was asking about, really, because I found that it just makes all the difference. And I think if more people were aware of that, they would stay away from going for the wild caught option. But obviously, if you're willing to put in the time and effort and potential years that it takes, then that's fine as well.
Yeah, no, I've always wanted to, if I had the space, the time, and the money, I definitely would love to head up a program to captive breed water monitors in the UK, because you see in America, and they're everywhere in America.
Yeah.
But you don't see. Sorry, excuse me. You don't see many of them over here as such. You do see a few, but you don't see many. So, like, I know when obviously the import came in for my Black Dragon, it was. I think it was 5 individuals last year's import, and that was it.
Yeah.
But that I know of anyway. There may be more. I have no clue. But you see things like Bosque monitors come in by the thousands, and where are all these Bosque monitors now? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, it's like you say, they're coming by the thousands, and a lot of people pick them up for I don't know what they go for these days. I know that when I first.
So you can get one for under £100.
Yeah, I thought so either, but maybe 60, 70 pounds, something like that. And people can just walk in there, talk the talk, take one home, and before you know it, they've power fed it with rodents. It's got fatty liver disease. It's like less than 5 years old.
Yeah.
And they pop the clogs way too early. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on the education side of things, especially of animals like the varanids and the retics. I just feel like there's definitely a niche in the UK for the landscape to be totally changed, like how it is in the States, like you mentioned, because it's almost a mainstay that you've got these reputable retic and monitor breeders who can put out their, hardy captive bred animals that are ready to be, in genuine pet homes and raised up to be a genuine interactive animal rather than a scared, startled animal, which is going to take potential years to come round or even get moved on from pillar to post.
Yeah, this is exactly. So obviously, I had the Nile monitor, and it was a very flighty bastard, very flighty. So every time I had to wear the gauntlets, to try and interact with it, and every time it latched onto my finger, it didn't hurt. It was a small individual, but it did move on to a better home, where they've put in a massive enclosure, and they're looking after it well. So happy for that.
I had a similar experience. Yeah, with the Nile, I had a similar experience as well. Ironically, it was a total opposite of where she'd been. I think she'd been imported, and she was like a handful of months old, absolutely tiny, maybe the size of my little finger. And she was actually handleable, and she was fine, being picked up and held. And I was handling her nigh on every day, and she was absolutely fine for the first year. And then those hormones kicked in. And she turned into a different animal almost overnight. I saw it within a week, from being handled regularly to all of a sudden being highly defensive. and just turning into a completely different animal. And the strange thing about that is, I persisted with her nut for another, I think it was like 1.5 to almost 2 years after. She never went back to how she was. It just kind of was like a switch in the mind. I never went back. And I think that's the whole thing where people deter people from keeping Niles, because a lot of them tend to sway that way. You do get the odd ones, and you see them on social media, the ones that are like puppy tame, but that is definitely the exception than the rule, I find.
Yeah, exactly. You see these ones on the internet now, like there's a guy in America, I think his name's 310 Exotics, and he has a Nile monitor, very, very puppy tame. And but then you see that someone see that video and go, "Oh my god, that's really cool. That's really deep. Let's go get one of them," and it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, the chances of the animal that you get ending up like that are very slim, definitely.
Exactly. Like, I was very lucky with my water monitor because when the shop imported them, they did a lot of work in house.
Brilliant.
For home, so it was good. It was brilliant. But if they hadn't had, I probably wouldn't have picked it up.
Yeah, I think with water monitors especially, it's like Kevin McCurley at Nerd, where he talks about the threads of trust. It's a real thing with those guys, because each small interaction builds another layer, and you just keep building and building, and eventually that bond can become really solid. But likewise, I found that if you make mistakes with them, it can set you back a couple of weeks before you can get back on track with them. So, they're not very forgiving, but you do get there. It's the more positive. You get more positive results in the long term, I find, especially with Asian waters.
Yeah, so I funny to say that I took my Asian water to the vets for a full health check over, and because my vet also works at a zoo, so she's the only one that would touch him. But I tried loads of different vets and they wouldn't touch it. So I was like, the individual's very flighty, and she handled it pretty well, to be fair. And but yeah, I got him home, and he hated me for about a week, 2 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah, they hold a grudge.
It was fine after that, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's about a week or so. It's not really bad, to be fair. And so yeah, it was just a full health check over, because since I had him, I hadn't taken him to the vets, and obviously, luckily, that the vet that I know said that she'd look at him for me, which is a bonus, because you don't really get many vets to see large lizards apart from iguanas and stuff like that.
You're right there, yeah, definitely, because I had to. Well, I've got you've probably seen I've got the Margus monitors as well, and my male, when he was young, I used to get in his enclosure. He had lots of platforms, and I think he must have fallen off one of them. And I came back one day, and his back leg just wasn't working. So I was there in a bit of a panic, calling around, to find someone who was willing to see him. It was so difficult. I ended up going somewhere in Sheffield. And even then, when I brought him there, the guy said, "I'll be honest, I've never seen one of these in real life before, but I'll treat it like I would an iguana, for example." And he had his femur was broken, basically.
Right, okay.
So they had to splint his leg. And thankfully, he was able to come out the other side of that all right. But like I say, just finding someone who has that specialist knowledge is pretty difficult, especially where I live. I know there's maybe more down south.
Yeah, no, obviously no. See, the only vet I found in my local area was the one obviously I found. I rang around so many places, to even see them, they wanted them, insured, microchipped, because again, like the black dragon is a very expensive animal.
Yeah.
So they wanted to even risk touching it.
Wow.
So yeah, no, because even for the insurance, like on a lizard that much, they were like, oh, it needs to be microchipped, it needs to be full health checked, and I'm like, it's not even old enough to have microchip yet. Do you know what I mean?
But they insist on all of these criteria before they even insure.
Yeah, and I think there's some vets are not fair to, or some insurance companies are only fair to certain animals, even though it's an exotic insurance.
It's strange because, the reptile keeping in the UK has definitely blown up, but it's still very much seen as just a niche interest.
Yeah.
Being treated that way as well.
Yeah. I've been keeping for on and off about 16 or so years now, and obviously went back in the beginning when me and my dad was keeping like berms and stuff like that. We you didn't really see it much. You never seen anyone in the shops really. But now, like, you go to a reptile shop and there's like loads of people in there. So I mean, definitely the economic side of it is booming at the moment.
Yeah, definitely fine. So, I mean, I saw a crazy stat the other day, but there's a decent percentage of the UK population that own exotics now, apparently, from what I read the other day. It was a surprising figure. I don't want to pluck a number out there.
Yeah.
But I still think that there's a lot of negative connotations around keeping exotics and reptiles. I mean, a lot of misunderstanding as well. And that tends to be the agenda which you always see, like when it's reported in the news or anything media-wise. It's still got a way to go, I think, before it's seen in more of a positive light. I mean, I guess even the States are still there, right? But I think we're even so further back even still.
Yeah. And we'll get on to that in a bit. There's a question in the list.
Yeah.
But I want to move on to sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you then. So because you said obviously you mentioned you got different things, would you mind telling the listeners what you actually own in your collection at the moment?
Yeah, so I mean, the vast majority of what I've got is reticulate pythons of various morphs, localities as well, and basically just things that I have a passion for. You know, where my creative mind wants to direct, where the different various clutches are going to end and what I want to produce, and things that I want to be able to share with other people, and just basically putting a bit of myself out there through the animals. Monitor wise, so as you've heard, I've got a female Asian water monitor. She's about coming up to 5 years old now. She's a Sumbawa locality, so even at 5 years old, she's only about maybe 4.5 feet long. She's not very big at all. But that's it with the island localities. As with the Retics, they just don't tend to grow as large. The male I've got, he's actually a hybrid. The male, he's a hybrid between Varanus cummingii and Celebensis.
Okay.
I just like, and it is very interesting because like the breeder who paired them, he's worked with them, as we've mentioned, from day one, from the day that they've hatched, and that's why he's like so tractable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where I will pair them again one day, but it's not one of those where I would ever not disclose what they are. I'm going to be saying, look, these are the bloodlines in this animal, and I'm producing them to be pet animals. I'm not, producing these with the mind of them going to someone who wants them to be breeders or anything like that. Or if anything, if someone is going to do that, they've got to disclose the fact that they are strictly to be just pet animals and not to be something to be passed off as anything other than what they are.
Yeah. So you see a lot of people that, like you said, like that don't necessarily want them just for pet only animals. They will, they will try and breed them, and that's a sad thing, really. We don't want everyone like it'd be America all over again. I mean, I'm not trying to bash people for owning water monitors, but in America they're very cheap animals in America.
I guess it's like with the Retics, where people buy them and just pump them full of food as quick as possible to get them to adult size to pump out eggs. It's different agendas and different reasons for keeping animals, but for me, any of my animals, even the ones that I plan to breed with in the future, I feed them nice and slow. I want them to be healthy. I don't want them to become like shapeless animals, with no muscle tone and things like that. It's one of those things that I'm very passionate about, just keeping the animals healthy as I'm raising them up. And sometimes I've taken on a couple of animals who perhaps been fed a bit heavy, so I like to try and scale it back and get them back to a better place before going forward with them. But actually, back to your other question with the monitors, I didn't finish my list, did I? I have the pair of Argus monitors, and I have also a suspected male black throat monitor as well. So those are my own guys.
Yeah, I love me a black throat. I mean, that's what I was before I obviously found out that they had the water monitors in the country. I was going to go for a black throat. There's just something about them that they're just majestic animals. Like
they're amazing, honestly. But I'd say, I think you saw the other day I was at my niece's school doing a little bit of a show and tell, and he was the animal I chose for that because they're so different to the Asian water monitors in terms of how they react to their environment. They kind of be just a lot more chilled out in the demeanor in comparison or activity levels. It's just the way they are. But I know that if I brought one of my female Asian water, she'd probably be all over the place. So she wasn't ideal for that situation. But the black throat, he was absolutely bang on.
Yeah, no, I always wanted a black throat. They just look so prehistoric.
It's their heads, isn't it? Like that dinosaur-shaped head, and they've got the broadest head of the monitors, I think.
Yeah. you mentioned obviously the hybrid water monitor. Is there any chance we can see that?
Try. Let's have a look. If I can. He's only little. Where is he? Typically, he's. Where is he? Don't know if you can see him actually. Can you even see him there? He's at the back.
Oh yeah.
I'll see if I can. What he's doing there actually. I'll try and get. Let me know if it goes off camera because I can't. Can you see himself?
No, the glass in the way still. Hang on.
Oh, how about now?
Wow, he's tiny.
Can you see him?
Yeah, he's tiny.
He's absolutely cool. Cool as.
Awesome. So that's you say that's the common guy with celebensis.
Yeah, that's the hybrid. So like this room's actually very much a work in progress actually. So I'm in the progress of moving things around, and tonight I'm actually moving the black spot outside to the new reptile house. So it's just one of those where things are constantly shifting around, especially when you've got young animals and they grow so quick, you know.
Yeah. So obviously we're planning. I'm thinking of. Well, we're planning at the moment. I'm going to build animal house in the garden. So there's going to be 2 walk-in enclosures for the water monitor and the new addition. And yeah, I can't say much yet.
So that gives a bit of a hint already of the size of the animal.
Yeah, 2 walk-ins, but obviously the water monitor, and then the other one's going to be a cohab, 2 different species.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, you'll be the first to know once I get the animal. But and then obviously upstairs, then will be I'm going to get a massive 11-foot viv for the boss monitor, and then I'm just going to get vivs and just put them in everywhere for all the other animals.
I think that's the thing, when you get these big vivs, that's when your creative juices can really get flowing and you can just have fun with, kitting them out however they want to.
Yeah, this obviously I got the 833 at the moment, and I kitted out how I wanted it for the water monitor. But then obviously I'm looking out here in the space I've got out of the garden, and I'm thinking, I can put this in here. I can put that. Yeah, mate, and my head's just spinning.
Yeah, that's it. You've always got the vision for what's next.
Yeah, and because I'm so impatient, I just want to get it done now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That is exactly the same with me. I'm always thinking about what's next, pre-planning.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's the beautiful thing about this hobby is that there's always more. It never becomes stagnant, does it?
No, some people play sports for hobbies, and it's just the same thing over and over again. With these.
I know all about that, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'd love to see. I'm going to ask to come and check your animals out at some point, definitely for sure.
Yeah, 100%. As I said, once everything's moved around and where it should be and things have been finalised, then yeah, by all means, mate, anytime.
Yeah, sweet. So I want to ask you a question. So, what's the craziest animal you've ever interacted with?
That I've interacted with.
Like a species. Like, what's the craziest thing in your mind that you've ever interacted with?
The thing is, the animals that I interact with, I don't consider crazy. So if I was to say, I don't know, if I was to say like an 18-foot retic or a 15-foot berm, that doesn't really sound too crazy to me.
Yeah.
Trying to think what is crazy. Oh, I'll tell you what was crazy. When I was in college, I offered a local pet shop to look after their. I want to say it was a cockatoo, umbrella cockatoo.
Oh, yeah.
I offered to look after that for a week. Biggest mistake ever. I had no sleep that week, screaming throughout the night, and the shop wouldn't take it back until the end of the week. So basically, I had a week of zero sleep. So if you want to say crazy animals, I would say that's probably up there.
That's nuts. I'd never ever go into birds and parrots because they are very noisy, very irritating animals.
Oh, the anxiety levels were at an all-time high that week.
So if I brought a cockatoo to your house, you have PTSD then, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it put me off for life anyway, so it did its job, didn't it?
And so if you could have any animal and licensing wasn't a thing, what bucket list species would you own?
God, if licensing wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking Komodo dragons.
Yeah.
Komodo dragons, or perhaps even like a Cuban crocodile. I love them as well.
Cubans are sick. Have you ever been to Crocodiles of the World?
I have, yeah. It's
Mate,
absolutely insane.
staying in there, mate. I was like,
Yeah,
I didn't want to leave. I was just kept looking
yeah.
around.
That was me as well. I think I went round. I definitely went round more than once, but I could have just stayed there all day. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I was obsessed with the water monitor. I was just looking at it for like a half hour, even though I wasn't doing anything. I was the pure sheer size was
Pretty
mental.
sure when I went there, the water monitor had already been relocated. I don't think it was on display when I went there. The water monitor, unless they've
Right.
brought it back now.
Well, I went in December, so
Also, must be because I went. It was a couple of years ago that I went, and it wasn't on display at that point. But yeah, I do remember seeing the lace monitors and
yeah,
just
I remember.
all these crocodiles I'd never seen before in the flesh. It was just crazy.
I love, like, obviously I got a big thing for black caiman.
Oh yeah, wow, like
Yeah,
14, 16 feet.
yeah, I seen one of them at Crocodiles of the World. I was like, wow, that's sick. Like, that's
I think
brilliant.
crocodilians are the ones that just like bring about that feeling of the most like prehistoric type of animals, more than anything, really.
Oh yeah, I mean most of them they've lived that long, haven't they? From
Yeah,
they've
they were
sort of
around at the same time anyway, weren't they? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So you want to talk about actually. So what are your thoughts on owning, like, obviously going back into reticulated python? So what are your thoughts on owning super dwarf retics over owning mainlands? And do you think they will be a thing in the UK following the success of the breeders in the US?
I think it would take some work from the UK breeders in terms of putting it out there as more of an accessible thing, because I still believe that for the most part, a lot of people in the UK see retics as like not forbidden, but something that's a little bit too far of a stretch because they're known as still being a little bit too feisty, a little bit too advanced, and not safe a choice as something to keep as a pet.
Yeah,
And I think if some work was put in there to just get more awareness there of the reality of how they are, because I've always said that I think retics are quite easy once you know how they operate. Once you know how they operate, then they're not intimidating and they're not scary and they're not so as difficult. It's when you go in there with the expectation of, I don't know, ball python or cord snake, that's when you're going to get caught off guard. But if you educate yourself and get clued up on their behaviours, they're always described as like having switches out there. They're in different modes: feed
yeah,
mode, territorial mode, and then thinking mode, where they're exploring and things like that. If you just know how to manage those different trains of thought, then they're quite easy to manage. And I just feel like it's something that a lot more people could gain access to, especially the super dwarf side. And that's another thing that I think we were going to get into in terms of talking about what is a super dwarf to a lot of people, because there's not enough clear lines drawn, I believe, to define what super dwarf is, because we're still seeing a lot of things being sold as super dwarfs, but then people are not able to say why it's a super dwarf. They don't know what the bloodlines are. They don't know what's in the animal, but it's just being sold as that just because, well, it's small.
yeah. I've noticed a lot of people sell mainlands as super dwarfs because obviously they're babies.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it the other day where there was one for sale, sold as a super dwarf. So I was inquiring because it had some interesting genetics, and I said, okay, well, can you tell me the percentages, or at least who bred them? And it was just a case of, I don't know who bred it. All I know is it's a 50% Kalatoa, 50% dwarf. And straight away, I left it at that, because you can't have something that's 100% super dwarf and dwarf, which has morphs in it.
Yeah,
And people don't realize that as soon as an animal has a morph in it, other than anery, then it has mainland blood in it, and there must be a percentage of mainland blood. But when we lose track of that, that's when we kind of lose credibility of the whole
yeah,
super dwarf line in the UK. For it to become successful, I think we need to be able to keep track of these things and be able to tell people and be transparent with what exact genetics they're receiving when they get an animal. And I think until people become more consistent with tracking that side of things, the super dwarf side won't pick up as quickly, because people are not going to have confidence in the animals that they're buying.
no, exactly. So I've had a fair few snakes in my time. Well, obviously I've had my first ever snake was a 12-foot berm. She was 18 foot when she passed, and she was a brilliant snake.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely, berms are amazing. Wild type berm. She was handed in from I think it was a rescue. She was basically, some dude got arrested and she was handed into the shop by the RSPCA, and then we took her on in May. It was spectacular, amazing snake. little did we know that she was pregnant when we brought her in. We took her in, and then she laid all these eggs. But
Oh wow.
they were all buds anyway. So, but it was at least it was an experience to learn. But I've owned the Berms. I've owned Retics as well. I had wild type Kalatoas. They are some spicy ass snakes, man.
They are spicy. That's one thing I will say, that I've always found that this is just my personal experience. Some people would argue against it, but this is just from personal experience. Any super dwarf which has a percentage of mainland, I've always found is a bit more chilled than when you get like, I'll say with Kalatoa, 100% pure Kalatoas that I've had have been spicy, as you mentioned, in terms of their Viv defensiveness. Once you get them fully out of the Viv and they're switched off, then they're okay, they're absolutely fine. But getting them out, they'll attack that hook, they'll attack the bulb guard, everything on the way of coming.
We got a male, and then that was a bought one. We bought that, and then we rescued a female pure Kalatoa from a private breeder who basically couldn't handle the snake, and she'd wrapped herself around the bulb on the guard.
Yeah.
It was guard up, but she was she was worse. She was very worse because obviously she had never been handled, she'd never been touched. And that was kind of my introduction to the spicy sides of, big snakes. And then,
well, I was just going to say, with mine, the crazy thing is I handled them every week without fail, and they're still exactly the same. So it just makes me think that, is it because I keep all of my guys in vivariums as opposed to racks? Because I know a lot of guys, keep the super dwarfs in racks up until, they're an established age. And seem to have no issues with it. So I'd be interested to know if that causes any more of a territorial instinct when they're in a vivarium as opposed to a rack situation.
Yeah, so obviously, when I had the Retics, this was, I was like 15, so it's good. Well, 9 years now. 12. Sorry, 12. My partner's just correct. And yeah, it was more of a case of I didn't really see racks back then because obviously I kept mine in vivs.
Yep.
But I don't know. I've never used a rack, so I don't know what the.
Yeah, that's the same here. Yeah, and I think that, I'd never say anything negative about keeping animals in racks. I don't have any issues with it at all. But because I don't have any experience with that. I can't compare whether or not they would behave differently in that situation.
Yeah, no, I don't knock people doing it. If it works for you, it works for you. But I just want personally keep in racks myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, we both have no experience in racks. Obviously, all my snakes were kept in bibs. I know some people keep snakes in tubs. I've noticed their snakes are a lot more defensive when I go to see them. So maybe it is like the enclosed makes it more. I don't know, but because you can say the same thing about vivarium, really, because it's all enclosed, isn't it?
It is enclosed, but I think is it because of the viewing window? I don't know, and they perceive things as being a threat that's passing by. It's hard to pinpoint it really, but I guess the only way would be, for example, if I was to experiment and have two different raise ups in different situations and compare the two.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably gonna have to get someone else on and that keeps racks, and we'll have to just go. We have to conversate back and forward about it. But definitely good conversation to talk about. Definitely, I think that it would be a great topic.
Well, that's it. It's like there's more than one way to go about things, and everyone's experience are going to be different depending on the route that they've chosen to take. So that's why when I say that I've noticed that the Kalatoas are spicy, like you mentioned as well, there might be someone watching now just saying that's absolute rubbish. They're puppy tame. You never know.
Yeah, but sometimes those puppy tame snakes have been pumped with rats and rodents all their lives. So
exactly, yeah. If an animal, yeah.
Again, I'm not knocking people for if they want to, that's their choice. But so yeah, obviously after the Retics, then we went back into lizards and bearded dragons because obviously again I was really young, so I bred my own bearded dragons with my dad. Never again because obviously there was so many babies. Because back then obviously you only get like the normal wild types, and no one really wanted them back then. And then obviously when I moved in with my partner, after being out of the reptile hobby for about 6 or 7 years or so. I then got into anacondas.
Were they the yellow or greens?
I had a yellow.
Yeah.
Was an absolute arsehole. She went actually with the same person who's got the Nile because they wanted an anaconda.
I tell you what I've noticed, some people, they only want highly defensive animals, and it's their passion.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. Like, obviously,
yeah.
we and my partner discussed if we ever do have kids, and we got this. It's not, I wouldn't say dangerous. It's just defensive. The very animal, and one, it just takes that one, like you said, the switch on the animal's head just to go. And so we got the one berm, we've got a couple of royals, and then the diamond python as well. So yeah, but that was definitely an experience having the anaconda in the house. It was brilliant. If I ever had a golf food, bang, it was eaten.
Well, I think I've mentioned there are actually a couple more species I've got. So I've got a male green anaconda as well. But he's like handling a ball python. He's that tame. It's ridiculous. But prior to him, I was sold one, and he was sold as being handleable and manageable. He was anything but. On arrival, because he was clap cold from the courier, he was fine. And then the next day, I just got to see his true personality. And this is an animal that I worked with him for a year, and realised that this really isn't getting any better. And I think that the final straw for me was when I was doing a clean out in his viv one time, and I looked to the far side of the viv, and he was curled up on the far side of the viv. So then I saw his poop on the other side of the viv, and I thought, all right, I'm fine to go and get his poop. I scooped it up, tied up the bag, and then I looked down immediately on this side, and his face was right next to mine. Yeah. And he struck up my face, and I'm not joking. He just whipped right past my face. I'd only just got out of the way in time. So what he'd done while he was on the other side of the viv, he'd burrowed under the substrate and gone underneath the substrate all the way to my side. And when I looked down, his head was popping up.
That's so smart.
That was the final straw for me.
Yeah, so one day, so obviously, yellow anaconda, she loves to just poo in the water. So it was really easy for me. It's just take the bowl, wash it out and put it back in. And I remember, I don't know if my partner was here actually, but I was upstairs and I was walking to the bathroom to empty the bowl. Actually, I didn't realise she was still in the bowl. And I looked down and there's snakes going up, and I was like, oh
jeez.
Luckily, she was more, because she was in the water, she was more calmer.
Inquisitive.
Just inquisitive, and I was like, oh, what do I do? And I just basically emptied the water bowl and filled it back up, put it back in with her in it, and it was like that never happened to me again. That
could have ended up very differently.
Yeah, no, I could have had a couple, but she was still small. She was probably about 5, I think 2.5, 3 feet. She was a rescue, so obviously I rescued her from a rescue, because no one wanted her. And I thought I'll put in the time, and then either keep her or move her on, so she gets a chance in life. And yeah, she was a brilliant snake, like a dustbin. Anacondas are dustbins.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it was very handy to have. And yeah, sometimes I do regret moving her on, but again, I got to think of the future kids and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think anacondas are another one where, when it comes to the feeding, there's a misconception that you just pound them with food because they're supposed to be absolutely giant. But people don't realize that in the wild, getting these 20 plus feet anacondas that weigh 300 pounds, it's the exception, it's not the rule. And the males can sometimes be more often than not, 10 feet or less.
Yeah.
And they're not these absolute giants that people seem to think. It does happen, but it is definitely an exception. And I think that
go down to diet as well. In the wild, they're eating capybara, they're large, foal, guinea fowl.
Exactly.
Big animals, which then gives them the size. Obviously in captivity, the biggest you'll get is over, piglets, or do you know what I mean? So there is a factor, definitely a factor in the prey they're eating to make it.
There's something in the idea of when they're in a massive body of water, apparently that affects their growth rate as well.
Yeah, obviously they got a space to move. I mean, there was a recent discovery in obviously of the northern anaconda, wasn't there?
Saw that. That was amazing.
Oh mate, it's brilliant.
But it's a shame that I don't know whether it was the case that the video exposed her location or not, or something must have, because she was poached, wasn't she, shortly after?
No, I didn't see
Oh, you
that.
didn't even see that?
No.
No, she was discovered. The guy was swimming with her, and within a week of that video being recorded, her dead body was found on the shore. People had hunted it down and just killed it. And I think it's a bit. I know the guy denied it. The guy who filmed said he never told anyone where they were located and whatnot. But you can never trust people that were with you. He was with trackers. He was with people who were accommodating them. You know, any one person could tell someone and
Yeah,
then reveal the location. And then how else would the poachers have found this animal if she'd survived there for that long as well, especially to get to that size?
mental. This brings us on to a brilliant conversation topic, actually, because um, obviously, like you said, people, so obviously not obviously hobbyists, but other people that not in the hobby, they see these animals as scary individuals. And obviously, I wanted to actually talk about what are your thoughts on obviously the education and being inclusive, obviously rather than the segregating, obviously with others. That would be a brilliant thing, actually.
Yeah, I kind of feel like in the reptile, you'll find that I'm not active at all when it comes to groups and forums and whatnot. Um, Mainly because when I observe the interactions in these groups,
Mm-hmm.
don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good information out there, a lot of good interactions to be had. But I've always found that more often than not, I'll find a lot of conflicts and things that are not just simple debates, things that turn into you know, people going back and forth, and then eventual insults and people getting offended. And I really don't think that's the way that the hobby is going to move forward at all. If people on the outside already see us with a negative light, then how are people within the hobby going to be fighting against each other over facts and debating over how things should be kept and whatnot? I think that as long as anything we do is not harming the animal, we're doing our best to make the animal thrive, and effectively we're not hurting anyone or anything, then we can all learn from each other and bounce ideas off and grow, rather than trying to put someone down and potentially put them off the hobby if they're going to be around negative people.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've come away from the Facebook group. So I was in the tortoise group recently. I discussed this on my last podcast, and basically, obviously, because I feed my tortoise like dandelion leaves in the garden, and I was just asking the question like, what other wild weeds can I feed my tortoise? And I got absolutely smashed for it, mate.
Really?
Yeah, and they're like, you can't feed it this. You got to boil it. You got to make sure it's all clean. I was like, I'm gonna clean these weeds.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
Like, is what I mean. I'm trying to educate myself on what other varieties of food I can give this animal, whether it's just instead of just a bloody lettuce or do you know what I mean, or just some
Yeah,
dandelion.
absolutely. I've seen that so many times where people are going in there and it's probably the first question that they're asking, and everyone jumps on them and tears them apart. That
Yeah,
person's not going to want to ask any questions anymore.
yeah, yeah. I am. I was also in another group about. I asked about lighting and stuff like that, and I mentioned like obviously using halogens, and some I'm not going to mention that obviously names and stuff like that, but someone mentioned to put a halogen light 48 inches away from the basking spot. Like, how big is this vivarium got to
Yeah, I
be?
mean, how high do they expect it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so. I mean, I know some people are set in their ways in these groups, and there's no changing them. But at the end of the day, if we all just come together and help each other, educate each other, it will be a lot better.
And that's the key thing is what, like I said, it's all about education, learning and growing, because just as you said, there's a lot of old school people who are set in their ways. Things always evolve, things always change, and things now, like the technology we've got to keep these animals is far superior than what was 10,
Mhm.
15, 20 years ago. Things grow, and if everyone had the mentality of let's grow together, I think the hobby would grow in a more positive light and more positive direction, and we'd be up there with, like you say, the guys in the States, how they do things. It'd just be more of a community.
Yeah, and this is what I'd love to see in the next 10 years. Most of the technology now going from having a tube UV bulb and a red light to go into like luminize and halogen bulbs and incandescent bulbs and mercury vapor bulbs. Do you know what I mean? It's technology has come so far. So there's a lot to be learned, and people shouldn't be scared to ask questions. Definitely. My inbox is always open for questions. I love answering questions. I love helping people, but there's definitely a leaf to be taken out of a book somewhere. Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm much like yourself. Like when I get something in my inbox, I'm happy to help, happy to answer questions. But I think that the biggest killer of people progressing together will be judgmental mentalities. That's going to be the biggest killer, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got one more question because we've gone through this pretty quickly,
Yeah,
actually.
sure.
So obviously, like you keep large varanids, I keep large varanids. But if you was to give someone, so if someone asked you, like, do you think water monitors or large monitors are a good pet for anyone, or like I obviously think they're a pet for an advanced keeper. But what's your opinion on that?
My take is that if you're a person who is willing to invest time necessary to learn every nook and cranny of what is required to keep that animal, and you're willing to invest the money, the space, and everything else that comes with it, if you have your heart set on an Asian water monitor, who is anyone to say no? You've got to start with an Aki.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. If you're willing to do that, that's only if. There's a lot of people who are not willing to do all that, and they'll just like shove the Asian water monitor in a little viv, and it'll just stay there until they're fed up, and then they move it on. But if you're someone who's genuinely got that passion to see it, do it the right way from beginning to end, then I have no issues with someone getting an Asian water monitor to start with. But that, unfortunately, is more of a rare occurrence.
Yeah.
So, for the most part, people should be looking to gain experience with a smaller species like an Aki or a Mulga monitor or things of that nature, because I think they're fantastic animals. They've got all of the intelligence, personality, behaviors that you're going to see in the larger varanids, and they're just downsized in something that you can, keep in a more manageable enclosure. But I still stand by what I said, that if you're someone who is determined, and you're not someone who's just dreaming, you're someone that's going to see through everything that you say, then an Asian water monitor might be the animal for you.
Yeah, like obviously, I before I got the water monitor, it's obviously with the start with the Nile, and then we got the water monitor, and then I kind of done it backwards really. Obviously, I got the Aki after, and I kind of like obviously gained experience, obviously keeping the water monitor, the Aki, the Bosque, and they're a very rewarding species in general, like a genus. But like you said, like it's what's to stop you if you do put the effort in and the time in the research, then even finding yourself a mentor as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think finding a mentor is a very good thing.
I very much did the same thing, because like I've never kept a corn snake in my life, but I jumped in with the pythons, retics, and like you said, I'd go to shops, I'd ask questions, I'd ask, can I interact with the animals, and just pick people's brain until they were sick to death of me. And then, when you're ready, you take the plunge, and there's no better way of learning. Obviously, once you've attained the baseline knowledge, but once you've got that animal will be the best teacher than anyone.
Yeah, you can watch countless amounts of videos on the internet, but it's until you get the animal home that that's when the real learning actually starts.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's obviously there's a lot of learning to happen with the hobby. Definitely great. We've had a great conversation today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem at all. But anytime.
If you want to give yourself a little plug, now's the chance.
Yeah, sure. So you can catch me up basically just on Instagram. So it's Hen.ch Reptiles. You'll be able to just see my journey with my Retic projects, my monitor lizards, and any other animals that I've got. So I've also got, like I mentioned, green anaconda and boas, which I am going to breed at some point, but that's probably like a year or so away. So yeah, just give us a follow.
Definitely. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, it's been a pleasure.
Just hang around. I'll chat with you after. And yeah, thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely, no worries, mate. Take care.
Yeah, hello now.
Bye.
So that has been episode 7 of the Reptile Chronicles podcast with me, Ken from Viv Visions. Obviously, I'll leave all the links for Henry stuff in the description. Obviously, remember the merch store is now live. If you do cop yourself a t-shirt or jumper or whatever, 50% of the profits go to the National Centre for Reptile Welfare. And yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you have a great evening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.